we get a news alert sometime on Wednesday that Chris Paul is going to be waived. Chris Haynes has this. The Suns are going to waive him. And then like an hour later, you get Woj and Shams reports that tell us different things from different angles, but that like he is going to meet with the Suns to talk his future. He has this June 28th deadline for the full guarantee of his contract. Otherwise, it is half guaranteed. So, Brendon, as the person of us who covers the Suns, go listen to Locked On Suns for even more Chris Paul content. Talk us through this. Like, what is going on here from a Suns team building perspective? I think that's like our prism in here we'll talk about the Chris Paul fall, like kind of where he's at, but from a Suns team building perspective, what's going on here?
They had him opt out of his contract after the 2021 finals, and we were kind of headed to this moment from that point on. He opted out of a deal that would have paid him about the amount that he has now made on this deal, minus a little bit. So they were like, Chris, do us the solid of giving us a little more flexibility with lower annual hits, with these non-guaranteed years that we can manipulate, and with that done, we'll give you a little more money than you would have gotten otherwise. Win-win. Let's shake on it. You took us to the finals. We traded for you when you were dying in Oklahoma City a slow basketball death. Let's do it. Now we're here. They need to decide what they're going to do. I think the hard part is they don't know what their other point guard option would be. And so I'm kind of curious from your standpoint, as a little bit more outside of this crazy situation than me, and avoiding all of the dumb salary cap mechanisms that are in play here. Very NFL-ish move the Suns might be pulling by cutting and then re-signing him. We don't see that in the NBA hardly ever, to the point where a lot of people weren't even sure it's allowed. It is allowed. But if they don't sign Chris Paul, as we're talking about the Suns team building, I don't know what else they do. Because it's not like they're not getting cap space. They have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on their team making $40, $50 million. This is not a situation of, let's cut him and then we'll go sign Fred VanVleet on a big, $100 million offer. That's not in the cards. It's basically this, or you try to get somebody for any mid-level exception or minimum or whatever you can scrounge together under the couch cushions and under the bed sheets from your, spare change that Matt Ishbia might have laying around. This is not shopping in the luxury section of the dealership. So what do you think that they would do if they did actually just say, we're done with Chris Paul?
I don't think financially it makes sense from a real competitive standpoint to just do that, is where I kind of come down on it. With where I understand some of this apron stuff doesn't kick in for a year. But you have Kevin Durant, who you just gave up everything for, right? And you have Devin Booker, who's in his prime, I think the best shooting guard in the league. You have those two guys. You have an owner who clearly wants to compete for big things. They just brought in Frank Vogel. I don't think this is an organization that and with players, frankly, and a coach who are going to just be cool with okay, we can process this for a little bit and take time. I don't understand what just eating $18 million really doesn't. I don't think they can just let him go for nothing in that way. It would make no sense to me, aside from we need to just do this standpoint. There's no logic to me to just be hey, Chris Paul, here's your $18 million. Thanks for the memories. What does that help you? That doesn't help them get better when they need to be winning right now.
Yeah. So they're in a weird spot where I don't think they can pay him $31 million because he gets hurt every year.
Look, here's the reality. Chris Paul is a legend. He's the point guard. He is not a $31 million player at this point in his career. He's just not. And that happens when you turn 30, when you get to your late 30s. You've been playing professional basketball as long as you have, and you have a history of injuries that are starting to mount up. That is just the reality. And that's not a slight on Chris Paul. It's just it's called aging, man. This is where we're at.
Yeah. So they can't do that, right? They can't pay him $31 million. It wouldn't make sense for some of the reasons you laid out. But they also can't just let him walk. And so that's where you get to the point where waiving him, eating the guaranteed amount, buying him out basically of the remaining years on his contract, taking that cap hit this year and then signing him to a minimum contract, which is kind of what the rumor mill seems to suggest is where we're headed or where we could be headed, might end up making the most sense overall. He seems to just want an answer of, am I staying here? I don't know if he cares how it happens. He knows he's probably getting bought out in some way, shape, or form either way. I think that's why the leaks kind of seem to be in disagreement. I think it was coming from two different camps. But that's why I think the Suns just end up doing it that way, keeping him over anything else, because they're not going to get flexibility to go out and get a demonstrably better player or even someone close to what you just described as an aging Chris Paul. Even that version of him, they're not going to be able to probably get somebody good enough to replace that if they do go out and cut him. And the reason they're doing this in the first place, part of the reason they can't afford the $31 million is it's not even so much about the second apron yet, because like you said, it doesn't kick in until next year, but just some sort of flexibility to operate. If they actually were to do all of this, I think they can get down to where they can operate starting the offseason as not a luxury tax team. And that matters for the exceptions and everything else. So it does make sense from a lot of different angles. If they did move away from him completely, I think you're going to hear names Ramona Shelburne already brought up, James Harden, Kyrie Irving has a history with Kevin Durant. They also allegedly tried to trade for Kyrie Irving before they realized Durant might be available. They were in on that with Dallas. All of these things are going to be out there. It's just not really realistic. Like, that could end up on our slop of the week before long. If it's like Kyrie Irving may take the mid-level exception to come to Phoenix. It's just ridiculous. Like, you can't plan on something like that.
The last thing I'll say about this, Brendon, is if I'm Chris Paul, I get why Chris Paul would feel this, would want clarity. I understand why Chris Paul would want clarity. Chris Paul...
Where would you want him to go if he doesn't stay in Phoenix?
I mean, we talked about the San Antonio thing. I think that would obviously be a good fit, but I think I would also want to see him, like, pursue winning a championship. Like, I don't think his legacy, like, needs it. He's one of the best of his generation. He's one of the best point guards ever. But if he wanted to, like, go play for the... I mean, I feel like the banana boat thing with LeBron would be, like, appealing to him. I could see that.
Yeah.
And I could see maybe, like, the Bucks, you know?
I kind of think it's going to... So his family's been in L.A. since he left L.A. With the Clippers. And he's been pretty vocal about the difficulties of being in Houston, being in Oklahoma City, and and that was a big part of why he wanted to come to Phoenix. So I kind of feel like it's going to be an LA or New York type of situation. It's going to be Clippers, Lakers, or Knicks, or something like that. Maybe the Spurs, that's kind of close enough. You know, there might be other situations that he could be sold on, but I think you're probably right. The LeBron thing is going to be there for him. If he can mend the fences with the Clippers, I could see that. But I think he wants to win one. I don't think it consumes him. He has said he's made peace with that, but how could you not? How could you not value that as you're making what might be your last decision with this stuff? Although Chris Haynes said he wants to play for several more years, you just never know how much time you have left. Are you surprised there wasn't a trade for him? Because that's the other part of this that's news, is like, by deciding on cut him or not cut him, this and that indicates the Suns don't really seem like they have a trade market for him. And that surprised me. I thought there would at least be some deals. It's just, how good are they? This seems like there's zero deals out there for him that are good enough.
I think it is probably what you were saying about if they are good enough. Because I'm sure there might be a deal out there. I think it's very possible there's a deal out there. I think the thing is that, like, it's hard to find Chris Paul trades to teams that can give up stuff for him that the Suns could use to then help them win right now. Like, that's San Antonio, for instance. Like, what are the Spurs sending you that is really moving the needle for you if you're the Suns in win now mode? That makes this really hard.
Doug McDermott and Zach Collins and Devontae Graham or something? Yeah,
not doing it for
so
you. There's not Chris Paul trades out there that I think really are like give the Suns what they need. I think is part of this. Like, a Chris Paul trade to me never felt realistic. Just like with the Lakers, like what is it like? Like, what would a trade with Lakers be like?
They don't have anything to trade because all their guys are free agents outside of, like, their superstars. The one that I thought might have made sense was something like Eric Gordon and Robert Covington from the Clippers.
Yeah.
Because they could shed salary, they could get two guys into one guy and clean up some of their, like, they have too much depth, but again, if you know that the Suns kind of are up against it with the need to figure out if they're even going to keep him, then why are you going to be in a hurry to give anything up if you could just kind of wait it out? And I think they almost screwed themselves with this looming deadline that everybody sort of knew they were going to have to play their hand at some point. Then it's like, well, why are we going to call you with this Godfather offer when there's no need for us to do that? We could just sign him for a minimum when it's all said and done. So I think he's coming back to Phoenix. If not, I would probably say like the Clippers would be my number 2.